Yo guys, I've got a spark which I'm going to use to ignite the fire for a brand new Skylander video here on the channel. So naturally, as a Skylanders fan, there are few pleasures greater than that of opening up a starter pack for the first time. You've just got one of the brand new iterations within the Skylanders franchise even, and you cannot wait to just rip into that starter pack and take out all of the contents, and always one of the most impressive of which to behold was the poster. I mean, of course, the poster was always inferior to things like the figurines and the portal of the game itself, because those were the real juice to the starter packs, but still, you would carefully unravel that poster. I mean, if you didn't do it carefully, you wound up ripping them 50% of the time. So naturally, with those posters unraveled and some of them being so big even that they can't even fit on the entirety of your bed, but with those gigantic posters all opened up, you can see before you just a wide cast roundup from the game at hand. And so, because you could see all of the Skylanders before you, you could finally see all of their finalized designs. You know, all of what their toys looked like from that 2D PNG type perspective. So naturally, some of those designs, and by extent some of those toys, those characters, were more anticipatory than others. I'm not even sure if that is a word, but it is now because I said so. So to put it blunt, there were characters on those posters that we looked forward to getting more than others, and that's exactly what I'm going to be looking at for today's video even. I'm going to be looking at every single Skylanders game and telling you the most anticipated Skylander going into that game. And bearing in mind that these are just my silly personal opinions, and each and one of us is unique and individual, so naturally we're going to be attracted to different figurines for different reasons, so it's easy to see why other people are going to be more anticipated for other Skylanders than others. So let's not be disrespectful in the comment section below, and I just want it to be pointed out that we're talking about anticipation here. We're talking about before I actually own for Skylanders, because sometimes Skylanders lived up to my anticipations, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes it was the complete opposite, and Skylanders that I never really anticipated wound up really surprising me. So regardless, this isn't a ranking list on how good the Skylander is. This is purely based upon how anticipated I was to get the Skylander when I first saw them on the posters from those starter packs. So now, with all of that established, let's roll the intro and get straight into today's video, because man, I have prolonged this here introduction for long enough. So starting off with Spyros Adventure, this one is going to come as a shock to a lot of you, but my most anticipated Skylander going into that game was actually Drobot over here. Now I know what you're thinking, what about Igniter? Well, Igniter is my favourite Skylander, but he wasn't at the time of Spyros Adventure's release my most anticipated. I didn't see him on the poster and think he's ever going to be my favourite, but then of course when I played him for the first time, my opinions changed and he drastically became my ranked #1 favourite Skylander of all time. And naturally speaking, talking of Igniter doesn't mean that there's a complete absence of anticipation altogether, because for my two runner-ups from Spyros Adventure, I have Igniter and Camo, both coincidentally part of the same triple pack, which is why I was looking so forward to that triple pack at the time. But unfortunately, for my birthday, I asked my grandma to get me that triple pack, but she was never able to find it, so she got me the Empire of Ice instead. Yeah, that triple pack was far superior to the Empire of Ice, that of Igniter, Camo and Warnado. But regardless on how anticipated I were for those figurines, I did eventually get all three of them, not in the triple pack mind you even. but I got them all the same. And yes, Igniter and Camo were both really cool looking Skylanders. I looked at the poster and thought I really want both of those characters. Camo had a nice sharp colour contrast which looked like it made for an excellent toy, not to mention I love dragons, so how could you go wrong with a life dragon? And then Igniter was a fire knight, it just kind of spoke for itself, so naturally I was anticipated for those two, but not to the same extent as I was the Drobot right here. Now bearing in mind that 2011 was a year when Transformers Dark of the Moon and How to Train Your Dragon, as in the first one, was still two brand new movies just newly introduced into my life that I had fallen in love with because I'm a kid and I'm not critical like that. I mean, I was right about How to Train Your Dragon 1, that film holds up, but Dark of the Moon on the other hand, not so much. Regardless, there are two things, well, one thing that either of those movies have even, robots and dragons. And what Drobot is an amalgamation of those two things, which is why I kind of got a little bit tongue-tied beforehand. So naturally it was the design of this character that made me so eagerly anticipated to play as him. Just a Drobot, yeah, that's exactly what he is, a dragon and a robot combined into one to make the Drobot. How can you look at this design and not be excited to place him in the portal and play as him? And on top of all that, I was watching reviews on YouTube and, you know, just online forums, reading about how good and overpowered this character was, and that just made me want him even more, because at the time I had 5 Skylanders for Starter Pack Trio, Spyro, Gilgrit, Trigger Happy, and on top of that I also had Ghost Roaster and Boomer, and stupid kid gamer me could not beat the final Chaos Boss fight on the Wii version with only the 5 of them, so I knew that an overpowered character like Drobot is all I needed to beat him in the end. Of course, naturally, I landed that final hit against Chaos with Bash instead, but still, the whole idea lies that Drobot was dumb, stupid, overpowered, and he definitely lived up to that, because not only is he overpowered, but also I have just a really great story that really pays off my anticipation behind this character, since I saw his triple pack at a Tesco one day, practically begged my mum to get the triple pack for me. She was generous enough to do so, but then when I got home I had to do some chores to basically earn the triple pack, and once I did so I was able to ravagely unbox my Drobot, and I had so much joy playing as him in the game thanks to my mum's generosity. So that's the story behind Drobot, my most anticipated Skylander from Spyros Adventure, and my second favourite from the roster actually, so he definitely held up. Now next up is Giants. Giants is literally in the name, so of course I was anticipating a few of the Giants. The major giant of which I was anticipating most had to be Eyeball. I mean, he's a giant chunk of armour with an eyeball that shoots lasers, for crying out loud. What from that doesn't imply absolute awesomeness? So naturally I was heavily anticipating Eyeball. And there was also a few reposes that I was anticipating as well. I really liked Prison Break from Spyros Adventure, and for Series 2 Prison Break, when I saw his design on the poster, I realised how damn cool it looked. I looked at that design and thought, that's how a repose should be done. He has so much detail put into it, and I cannot wait to own just such a prestigious looking figurine in real life. And naturally, the figurine itself lived up to those expectations, and from there I also learned how overpowered the WoW power was, and if I had known about how great the WoW power was before I had eventually gotten around to the character, then my anticipation just would have been even higher. But still, my most anticipated character from Giants was actually a core, not a repose, nor was it a giant, because instead it was Popfizz, a Skylander which they showed gameplay of very early on. So from the very early trailers we knew that Popfizz over here could turn into a beast and just start savagely striking away at his enemies and lobbing potions as his, you know, primary form of attacks. And so naturally that was a very unique playstyle, which at the time was incredibly distinctive and stylized for Popfizz. You couldn't find that same gameplay style with any other Skylander, so naturally I wanted to pick up Popfizz just for the unique experience he created. He became so anticipated for me because his gameplay just looked so much fun. I mean, unfortunately his design isn't the greatest. He's just a cute little gremlin fellow with a, you know, a potion that he looks as though he's about to drink. Of course, naturally some of you would be attracted to that type of design if you're a big fan of the movie Gremlins. Personally, at that moment in time I had never seen that film. But regardless, he was cute, so that of his design was awesome, but what really made me anticipated for Pop Fizz was his gameplay style. Can't emphasize that enough. You can even see in the gameplay before you just how great the gameplay style of this character was, and once again he was another character that really lived up to my anticipations, to say the least. Next up is Swap Force. Now from Swap Force I had quite a few Skylanders I was anticipating, especially from the core lineup, that being Doomberg and Scorp in particular, both of which had incredible designs, and one lived up to anticipation and one did not. I'll give you a hint, it was Scorp that lived up to anticipation because Scorp's gameplay is phenomenal, but either way, both had really great designs that I was so looking forward to playing as. Unfortunately, Doomberg heavily disappointed me, but I'll tell you who didn't. My most anticipated Skylander going into Swap Force, which was of course Magna Charge. I mean, he's a robot with a gun arm. That in and of itself is raw awesomeness. And then he's also on a wheel, which implies literal speed. You can see it right there on his base, despite the little gleam from the light above me. So yes, this character looked fast-paced and looked incredibly fun to play as. And naturally, I've shown you Nitro Magna Charge here purely because of the fact that there's an interesting story behind this character, in the fact that when I asked my parents for this character for Christmas, they wound up getting me a dual pack with him and Rattleshake, but of course the dual pack had the Nitro rendition rather than the regular rendition. And going into Swap Force, I never planned to pick up all of the in-game variants just because I thought that would create too high a quantity on my collection and would be far too difficult and expensive to pick up all of them. And then that fateful Christmas day when I got Nitro Magna Charge, I decided, screw it, I'm going to attempt to get all of the variants anyway. So Nitro Magna Charge was my first ever in-game variant, and he was the variant that convinced me to try to collect every other variant afterward. So yes, that in and of itself is a very interesting story behind me getting Nitro Magna Charge specifically. And from there, when I played him in Swap Force after I got him for Christmas, he definitely lived up to my anticipation because he still was a robot with a gun arm and a wheel that sped him up. You know, that wasn't lost in translation between the figurine and the game. But on top of all that, his gameplay was really fun. You could pick up an enemy with his magnet head and just throw him off a cliff face. It was so incredibly fun. His upgrade chamber is really cool as well. I love the fact that down one of the paths you can shoot off a rocket rather than having to worry about your weapon overheating. You know, it takes out the one flaw of a character, that being you have to wait for the cooldown, which in and of itself is a really unique mechanic to Magna Charge. So yes, the gameplay for this character intrigued me, the design intrigued me, and all of the anticipation paid off when I finally acquired Nitro Magna Charge, my most anticipated Skylander from Skylander Swap Force. I just saw him on the poster and instantly made the connection and wanted him eagerly because he looked so damn cool. That's exactly what anticipating a Skylander means the moment you see them on the poster, mind you. So next up is Trap Team, yet another game where there was a lot of course I was eagerly anticipating. Chopper and Fistbump being my two choices for the runner-ups, since I looked at them on the poster and thought that they looked both cute and badass, and there's nothing better than taking a cute Skylander and absolutely annihilating enemies with them. Like seriously, just having such sheer chaos harvested from a smaller being in the Skylanders is so satisfying, and that's why those core designs intrigued me and made me highly anticipated to pick up those Skylanders. But still, for Track Masters, for those of you who saw one of my recent live streams would get the meme, but regardless of all that, the Track Masters in Trap Team were everyone's most anticipated. Of course, he was looking forward most to the Ultimate Trappers, the ones that were overpowered in-game intentionally. They could open elemental gates, take down villains more easily with a damage buff, and they even extended the villain timers. So naturally, of all the Trap Masters, which one did I anticipate the most? Wildfire, of course. I mean, look at this guy. He's a golden lion, first of all. His texturing is incredible. You could tell that from the poster alone, because the poster just showed such the sheer amount of detail that the figurine possessed, including the little lion face on his shield. So the fact that the poster was able to convey how awesome the design was incredible, and that's why when I looked at the poster, I saw Wildfire's just pride. You could see that with his figurine, his posing just makes him look so victorious. And so yes, I was drawn to him on the poster and was excited by the mere look of his design. But on top of that, again, this is a character which they showed off gameplay for very early on during the marketing of Trap Team, and he looked so much fun to play. He had fast-paced, well-animated combinations that looked like they dealt stupid damage, which they did. He had a roar that breathed fire. Just take a moment to realise how awesome that sounds. A fire-breathing roar. Wow. But yes, Wildfire has some very impressive looking gameplay and incredible looking design, and so naturally from Trap Team he became easily my most anticipated character, let alone my most anticipated track master of the bunch. Superchargers was a game where, because there were so few newly introduced characters, I could anticipate them all equally, because I knew that one day I would own them all, with them not being particularly rare or, you know, too expensive to come by, if there only being 10 of them, which is what I'm putting emphasis upon right now. But still, if I had to pick my top 3 most anticipated characters from that title, my 2 runner-ups would go to High Volt and Fiesta. Again, based on their design alone, High Volt's design looked really cool, and I loved how armoured up he looked. And then Fiesta, there's no need to even explain why Fiesta's design is as good as it is. I mean, he's a literal Fiesta in and of itself. He's a trumpet. He has a trumpet even that fires off music, creates amigos. His outfit is really fancy and a great reflection of Mexican culture. So overall, he's a very well designed figurine, and at the time I had no idea that his gameplay was going to suck. But still, I anticipated that character from Superchargers and looked at the poster thinking he is going to be absolute awesomeness based on his design alone. But there was no Skylander that I looked at on the Superchargers poster that I anticipated more than Smash Hit. I mean, it's a marsupial, which is a very unique creature because we haven't seen that reflected as a Skylander until Smash Hit was introduced. But on top of that, he has a massive Wrecking Ball. The only thing that could make this character even better is if he had an actual Skylander's Wrecking Ball for Wrecking Ballception. You can even see the image to whatever side of the screen it's on. I don't want to point because selfie mode confuses me. It'll be right here. Regardless of that awesome image now burning into your brain, what made me so anticipated about Smash Hit was not only the unique design they took up with him, especially with him being a marsupial and everything, but just the fact that Wrecking Ball implied that he'd have so much power. Again, he was a character that was heavily utilised in the marketing, making his gameplay look incredibly awesome. I mean, he swung his Wrecking Ball around and then he smashed it into the ground, and he could detach his chain to start whipping enemies. Just like Pop Fizz, it had the strength of looking very distinctive and unique to this character. So the fact that this character could offer up a gameplay style unique to him and something that no other Skylander could replicate, that alone made me really anticipated for this Skylander. And even though I found his variant ugly, like seriously, the shades of green used for steel-plated Smash Hit as the dictionary definition of ugly, you look up ugly and you will see those colours used for the steel-plated Smash Hit variant. But regardless of all that, it's still my first non-starter pack Superchargers character because I managed to pick up steel-plated Smash Hit on day 1 of Superchargers release. And whilst the colour palette wasn't great, and at first the gameplay did not live up to my expectations, soon enough as I started upgrading Smash Hit, he became an absolute wrecking force, pun intended. And man, did he live up to the anticipation in the end, because he is just as powerful as his trailers made him out to be. So yes, that is what made Smash Hit the character that, when I looked up the poster, I instantly gained the most anticipation for. But now we're going to move on to Imaginators, where I'm breaking my own rule. Rather than give you 2 runner-ups as I have been doing up to this point, I'm instead going to give you 4, because Imaginators had such an incredible cast. I can't believe that I'm praising Imaginators this video, but credit where credit is due. There is something that Imaginators did for best within the franchise, and that was its cast of playable characters, because all of the senseis have incredible designs and are all incredibly fun to play as. But naturally there are 5 which shine above the rest. So starting off with the obvious honorable mentions. There's Robo and Wildstorm. I was as anticipated for them as everybody was. Their designs are practically universally beloved. They are detailed, they look really cool, their weaponry is really unique to them, and overall they just really stand out on the posters due to just how incredibly detailed their designs are and how cool they look. And then my other two honorable mentions are going to be Chain Reaction and Buckshot, both of which again have really original and distinctive designs that really stood out on the posters. I saw them on the poster and I had an instant connection, knowing that I just had to pick up these guys. Like seriously, my want became so desperate that it turned into a need. I needed these characters because they just looked so damn cool. And yet still, there was no character in Imaginators that I looked forward to more than Flarewolf, who actually went on to become my favourite sensei. No coincidence there, because he lived up to all this anticipation of mine. First of all, he looked incredible. I mean, he was a wolf on fire. That design just was jumping out of the page when it came to the poster, you know, it was jumping up and down straight at me, waving, look at me, I look so awesome because of its sharp colour contrast. Seriously, the reds and the golds on this figurine looked so cool, and it was definitely a figurine that looked like it was going to have some texture I would thoroughly enjoy. You know, the same thing that I said about Wildfire could be applied to this character. But the main thing making me eagerly anticipative towards this character, again a word that I've probably made up, was the dragon cannon. We've established already my love for dragons. Well, this character had a massive bazooka that was as big as the entirety of the figurine itself, with a dragon wrapped around it. This design, it spoke to me. This design was made with me in mind. The developers looked into my brain and found the perfect weaponry for any Skylander to helm. The design, it was perfect. When I saw it on the poster, I about cried from happiness with how perfect it looked and how excited I was for this character. Not to mention, when you looked at the gameplay for the character, a lot of the trailers showed off his Sky Jeep, which had his massive 4 bazooka onslaught. How could you not want to play with a character that had an onslaught type move of that capacity? Like seriously, if I was to rank all 6 of these characters that I anticipated most from each of these games, then Flarewolf would rank number 1 for my most anticipated. Of course, in terms of well-roundedness, Drobot would win out because he is my favourite period of all 6 of them, but still, based on anticipation alone, Flarewolf was a character that my eyes even became most attracted to on the Imaginators poster. He really quite literally jumped off the page for me with just how awesome he looked and how glorious that cannon looked more specifically. Like, that alone made the design so incredible and the character looked like so much fun to play as. And it's for all those reasons that Flarewolf was my most anticipated sensei from Skylanders Imaginators when I first saw that poster, mind you. So here are all of the Skylanders I talked about in this video, all lined up in their glorious glory before you. In fact, just saying the words glorious glory is not nearly as close to summarising how great each of these characters are. It's easy to say that these are the characters that lived up to my anticipation for each and every one of them. And I just want to emphasise the fact that this isn't a video talking about my favourite Skylander from each game. This is just a video talking about the Skylanders that when I first acquired the posters for the games, for Skylanders of those posters in which I was most anticipating. That's what this is, a look back to my most anticipated Skylanders from each game, not my favourite Skylanders from each game, but I think I've repeated myself enough to where this broken record is about ready to move on and acknowledge the fact that there's a clear pattern here. Most of these characters are either tech or fire, and that's mostly because my 3 favourite elements in Skylanders are tech, fire and earth, so naturally I always found myself drawn most of those characters. So when I looked at the posters, those were the elements which I checked out first, because I knew that those were going to be some awesome characters from those elements, with them being my three favourites and the three most consistent elements in terms of quality, in my personal opinion. And then Magic Element with Pop Fizz just sneaking in there as a small little exception to the rule, I suppose, because yes, Magic is actually amongst my least favourite cast of characters, purely because it's so unbalanced. Some Magic characters are crap, whereas others are phenomenal. The example again being Pop Fizz. Man, Pop Fizz just seems to be sneaking all about this video. But regardless, I think this is a perfect place to wrap up. I sure hope you guys enjoyed me rambling on about the Skylanders that I found myself most anticipated for when I first took a look at the posters from each of their respective games. And as a final summary, yes, my top three elements are Fire, Earth, and Tech in that specific order, which is why there's a pattern before you, because those elements were always the ones that I found myself most anticipating with each new game, because they were just so consistently high in quality. But with that all being said and done, this video is coming to an end. I want to thank you all so much as always for watching, and until the next video arises, peace.